I was Wayne Gehring. I was born and raised in 4 west and 2 3/4 south of Mountain Ridge. 4 3/4 mile south of the Eden Church, which was my home church. And stayed there until, uh, well, probably should first say that I went to grade school in a country school about 3 miles from the house, and went to Mountain Ridge High School. Uh, Spent all my young life at Eden Church. It was a home church. Baptized in 52, and
How old were you when you were baptized?
12.
12.
Well, I was probably 14. Yeah, I was probably 14 in 52. And then in 55, I'd met my wife, Karen, and she belonged here, so I transferred my membership from Eden Church over to here. And we're here most of the time, except for 18 years. We were in the Gospel area, so I belonged to Tabor Church. We transferred our membership over there. 55, I transferred my membership over to here, so it was a year before we got married. And we got married on March the 10th of 57. Took our honeymoon down to Colorado Springs. My sister and her husband were in service in Denver at the time, so on our way back home, we went through Denver and stopped over there and saw them for a little bit. And while we was there, I just decided, well, I'll check one of the hospitals and see if they need any help. Start my service there. Wasn't drafted then yet, but everybody else was going in without being drafted. And we worked at Rose Memorial Hospital in eastern part of Denver. Started working there around the 20th, about 10 days after we got married. So all we did was we come home, loaded up the car, and went back. And so worked on 7th floor in the hospital over there with our 5th floor in the hospital with what we kind of talked would be the senile ward, is where all the elderly went. It was a Jewish hospital, and I met a lot of high-ranking officials from the Jewish army and everything. Didn't have any problems with any of them. In fact, I've had a lot of generals say that if they'd only known that there was something like conscientious objectors there at that time, they would have gone that way instead of going to the army. And first of all, when I walked into their room and they said, well, what is a young guy like you doing here? Well, I says, I'm a CO. And he says, oh, what kind of office did you hold? I says, no, I wasn't that kind of a CO. I was a conscientious objector. So, and then I had to I was able to take care of quite a few rabbis that were in the hospital there. So I was there on that floor until I was called home for my mother's passed away from 3 heart attacks in 2.5 days. So we made it home just in time before she passed away, and then stayed for the funeral and went back. And shortly after we went back, I transferred off of the ward into surgery. I was a surgical orderly then. And that's where it got interesting. As I saw about any kind of surgery you can imagine. It was the hardest one that I saw was a 6-month-old baby having open heart surgery, where they wheeled in an old leg tub into the surgery room and had it half full of ice and water. And after the baby was put to sleep, they put it in the ice to lower the body temperature so there wasn't so much stress on the heart. And picked the ice cubes off of it when we took it out before we put it on the table. That's how cold it was. So all the way to a lot of tonsillectomies and things like that. All different kinds of surgeries, amputations, the crude way. With instead of having regular equipment, they had hand drills like you see in Dad's shop, or an old saw to cut the leg off, or whatever, the arm, or whatever it was. So it was kind of gruesome, and the first couple of times I had to crawl out of the surgery room before I could go back in there and watch the rest of it. So it was rather interesting. Other than that, spent the rest of the time in surgery until I got released. But going back a little bit, we was there probably about 3 months. April, May, probably somewhere in June, end of May, and first part of June, I got a letter from the draft board and says, you're supposed to report to the draft board within, I think, 12 hours or something like that. Well, that was impossible, so I called, and they said, well, told them what the situation was. It was okay, you just report over there to Denver, to the office, and they'll put you through the paces and get your physical, and then it'll be over with. So that was when I was drafted, you might say, but my time started when I started working there at the hospital. We came home, moved over to Inman, lived in Inman for, that would have been 59 to 61. Then we bought a house here in Buhler. Lived here till 66. Moved to Gossel in 66. And was up there till 28 years would make it, 94, I think. And then we came back here to Buhler, and took over Karen's folks' house, and they got ready to go to the home. They were custodians over here at the church, so mother-in-law got to where she couldn't get around too well after she broke her hip, and they got an apartment over at the home in Inman. So other than that, you might say music has been my life. I sang my first solo in front of a group when I was in the 7th grade, in grade school. I started out as a bass singer in the men's glee club in high school because my brother-in-law was in it. And I liked the bass, so I started singing bass. And the next year they said, well, we need some leads. So I said, okay. I sang lead then my sophomore year. Junior year, I went up to top tenor, and I haven't been able to get out of it since. Sang in a men's quartet at Denver. There's 4 of us guys got together around the campfire and we just started singing one night. We did go to the old Mennonite Church in Denver. At that time, there wasn't a general conference church there. We did start a general conference church in Denver, must have been in 58. It was about my last year that I was there, so yeah, it would have been 58. We started in a Seventh-day Adventist church. They let us use that on Sunday. And just as we was getting ready to come home, they did the groundbreaking over at the Buhler Mennonite Church. So I guess you could say that I was kind of a charter member of the Denver Mennonite churches. But getting back to singing, I sang in a quartet in high school the last 2 years. Sang in a quartet here in the church with Karen's uncle and Jim Lawrence and Ray Siemens, and her uncle was Elder Regier, dad-in-law's youngest brother. So sang here for from 62 to, or 60, well, really 59 is when we started coming back to church here when we got back from Denver. And from 59 till 66, 65, because Jim Lawrence moved over to Minnesota, where he's at now. So, and then in gospel, I sang in the quartet over there for 26 years at the Tabor Church. And then after that, I was just not being affiliated with any special church. I sang in different quartets ever since. The first one we sang in was with a couple from Newton, where Karen and I both sang with them for, that must have been about 4 or 5 years. That would have been longer than that, because it would have been from 84 till 2000. Well, he got sick before that, so it probably been more like 98 when the bass got sick and passed away. And then we started going down to South Texas during the winter time. And the piano player that I was used to singing with kind of asked whether we'd come down with them, and so we went down to the South Texas, and I led the Sunday morning service singing over there, and was part of the board of directors, I guess you might say. And they're a friend of ours that we had heard, really not met him that much before that, came down. They used to come down there all the time, South Texas, and they just came down for a couple of weeks. And piano player, which is Alan Matthias, said that you're going to sing in a quartet. And he asked with whom, and he said, with Wayne and Karen. He said, who's that? So we started singing there, and we sang together from 2001 till, probably, 4 years ago? Well, no, it's been longer than that, because Karen passed away in 13, and we sang at a teacher's group in Newton 2 weeks before she passed away. She'd been diagnosed with ovarian cancer for 14 months. And Then after that, well, we kind of laid low for a little bit. The guys got me to sing in a quartet, male quartet out of Hutch with a group over there, and we sang here in church with that group a couple of times. One with the original member who was a pastor over at Partridge, and then he went to his home church in Western Virginia, right outside of Washington, well, outside of Virginia Beach, about 40, 50 miles. And we got another guy that our bass at the time moved up to the lead and took the pastor's place from Partridge, and got the piano player's second oldest boy to sing bass. So we had that quartet until this last year, and now it's getting to where we don't know what we're going to do for sure, because different illnesses in the group are coming up to where we don't know just what's going to happen. But other than that, that's been most of my life. Well, we didn't really have that much money that we could do anything big, but got paid twice a month. So that was our hamburger night to go out and eat, and then fill the car up with gas and head for the hills. Spend some time up in the mountains. There was a good lookout point. In fact, they call it Lookout Mountain. That's just west of Denver before you get to Golden. And then there's a couple of nice valleys to go through. Clear Creek, Evergreen Valley goes to Evergreen Lake to the southwest. Did some fishing up there in the lake. Just didn't do any good, but did some fishing. But other than that, we just didn't do a whole lot, except we did go up to where the big rodeo is at over there in Wyoming, Cheyenne, Wyoming. We went up to the rodeo one time. So that was just an interesting part, and yet I was disappointed. You go to the rodeos around here, and the rodeo was right there in front of you. Well, this had the horse and buggy, buckboard and everything, covered wagon racetrack around the outside of the rodeo. And the rodeo was inside, so if you wanted to see something real close, you had to have binoculars to be able to see it. And I took some movies of that. Of course, we had the parade first, so I got some good movies out of that. But other than that, we didn't really do a whole lot. That was interesting because I was talking to one of the other orderlies that wasn't a 1W, and got to talking with him about what I was doing there as a CO and 1W work, service work for 2 years. And he says, well, you can believe what you want to, but he says, the Bible told me that Jesus came to his own, and his own received him, and he didn't care about anybody else. And what kind of rebuttal do you do on something like that? That's not the way I read it, but that's what he came up with. Other than that, it was interesting to talk to the different people that I talked to as I was helping there on the senile ward floor, what I called. That was really the only confrontation that I got out of it, not all the time that I was there. The rest of it was good objectives. It probably was strengthened more with when we started really the General Conference Mennonite Church there in like what I said before, when it was in Seventh-day Adventist Church. Getting started on that and getting the pastor and everything together, because there's only, I would say, just maybe 10, 12 couples, and from around 2 or 3 couples from around here in Kansas area, and the rest of them were from Nebraska, around Henderson, Nebraska area. So that was probably one of the faith increasing. I really can't say either way. I've met a lot of people down there that I know now that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Just met a couple from Gospel that was down there, happened to move into the same triplex basement apartment that we was living in. Even though I grew up 13 miles from Gospel, we didn't know them until they moved in over there and went to work in the same hospital that I was working in Rose Memorial. So, just as any enlightenment of my faith was probably, most of it was down in South Texas, where I was on the board, and for some reason or other I was responsible to get the pastors for our church services there until the last few years. After Karen passed away, I kind of played a different part, but had the pastor that we had at the first park down there, he was in his 80s already, and he said he wanted to preach until he had his 50 years in. And he did that, and then he retired, and I knew the pastors that we had down south, they were all Baptists. And so they had the Valley Baptist organization down there, and we were placing people in different parks. And I got acquainted with the second man from the top, and I can't tell you his name right now. But anyway, I got acquainted with him, and so I went to him and I asked him, I got a problem. I need to have somebody as a pastor for our park. And he says, well, that's no problem. He says, I got the person for you. I said, okay. When can I meet him? He says, well, he's not here anymore. He went back home. Well, where's home at? Wichita. So I said, that's no problem. That's only a half hour from us. So went down there and met him, and he took the position. And when he took the position, it was when the park was sold, because the owner had passed away, and she'd said that nobody of the children were going to stay on the park, they was going to sell it. So he had to go to a different park, and told him about it, and he said, that's no problem. He says, I can go there too. So he finished out the first part of the season of being down there from March, April, and well, maybe till March, probably from January to March. And then we had to move off of that park because it was sold, so we went to a different park. And he went along with us, and he was there for, gosh, I don't remember, 3-4 years. And then he decided it was time for him to retire, so I went back to my guy and says I needed some more help. He says, well, that's no problem. He says, I got the man for you, and he lives right here on the park that I'm on, which was kind of handy. So we had him for a year, and he was a little bit of a different person. So the rest of the board didn't really want him for the next year, so I went back to the guy and says, I need some more help. He says, I got just a person for you, but he's not here anymore. He went home. Well, where's home? He says, Joshua, Texas. I says, well, that's not that bad. That's only 15 mile off the course trip on the way home, so we'll just stop there and see him. And he was the one that we finished with. So that was faith increasing and challenging at the same time. Other than meeting a lot of very interesting people and having a chance to get more than acquainted with them, working with them every day, and that's mainly the patients that I worked with, because on that floor that I started out working at was the last resort, you might say. They didn't very often go home except to heaven. So just getting to meet and be able to talk to different people about why I was there and all that. When you're in surgery, you didn't get that chance to do that. Except some of the doctors knew why I was there, and they didn't have anything to say about it, even though our break time was in the doctor's lounge. So I got a chance to meet a bunch of the doctors and get to know them a little bit better. But other than that...
All right, yeah. If that's it then, I think we're good then.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming in and doing
You
this.
bet.
Yeah.